In this lesson, we're going to learn how to multiply and divide square roots and also do what's called rationalizing the denominator. So let's start with kind of an easy one. Let's do square root of 5 times square root of 2. Okay, so what we do is we multiply the outside times the outside, the inside times the inside. And if we look on the outside of these two radicals, there's nothing there, so we just act like it's a 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, and so we can leave it with nothing. And then we do the inside, 5 times 2 is going to make 10. So we end up with square root of 10. Okay, then we want to look at it, make sure that we can simplify it. In 10, we can simplify, we can find any perfect squares of factors of 10 to simplify it with. All right, so let's try a different one. Let's do square root of 6 times square root of 3. All right, so there's nothing on the outside, so it's going to be nothing on our answer. And then we have 6 times 3 on the inside is going to be 18. So we get square root of 18. But wait a minute, 18 we can simplify. Think of factors of 18. We have 1 and 18. And then we have 2 and 9, with 9 being a perfect square. So we can take 9 and use it to simplify with. So we'll split 18 into square root of 9 times the square root of 2, which is going to equal 3 times the square root of 2. All right, let's try one where we have a number on the outside. Let's do 2 times the square root of 15 times the square root of 3. All right, so on the outside I have a 2 times a 1, which is 2. On the inside I have 15 times 3, which is going to make 45. So I end up with 2 times the square root of 45. And if we look at 45, we can think of factors of it. Let's see if we can simplify it. So 45 is going to be 1 in 45. It's going to be 3 and 15. We already got those. And then the next factor would be 5 and 9, with 9 being a perfect square. So I'm going to stop there and use the 9. So we can split it like this. We'll do 2 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 5. And then square root of 9 is 3. So it's 2 times 3 times square root of 5. And 2 times 3 is 6. So we get 6 times the square root of 5. All right, let's try one with a negative. So if we do negative square root of 20 times square root of 5. Okay, so we'll do the outside first. We have a negative 1 times a positive 1. That's going to make a negative 1. And then on the inside we have 20 times 5, which is 100. So we end up with negative square root of 100. And then square root of 100 is just 10, so it's going to be negative 10. All right, let's try one where we have to do the distributive property. Let's do square root of 5 times, inside parentheses, square root of 6 plus 4 times square root of 10. Okay, so we're going to distribute the square root of 5 to these two terms. So let's start with square root of 5 times square root of 6. That's going to be square root of 30. And then we do square root of 5 times square root of 10. And that's going to be square root of 50. And then don't forget the outside. So we have 1 times 4, which is 4. Okay, so that looks good, except we need to see if we can simplify. So think of factors of 30 1 and 30, 2 and 15, still no perfect squares, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. Okay, so there's no perfect squares inside of 30, so we're going to leave it alone. But what about 50? So let's try 50. It's 1 and 50, 2 and 25, and I'm going to stop there because 25 is a perfect square. So we're going to split this second term, 4 times the square root of 50, and we're going to make it into 4 times the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll get square root of 30. That we're going to leave alone. Plus 4 times square root of 25 times square root of 2. And we'll get square root of 30 plus 4 times 5 times square root of 2. And that's going to be square root of 30 plus 20 times square root of 2. Okay, our next topic is going to be dividing square roots, and we're going to do what's called rationalizing the denominator. Alright, so let's talk first about a rule, and this is very important, so make sure you write it down. The rule is there are no square roots allowed in the denominator. And that's very important that you remember that. And this is sometimes called rationalizing the denominator. So if you see on a test, I'll say rationalize the denominator. That's what they mean. They mean to take out all the square roots out of the denominators. Alright, so if you think of dividing something, what you're really doing is you're making it into a fraction. So let's try this one. Alright, so here's an example. We're going to do square root of 4 divided by square root of 16. Okay, so first we'll see if we can simplify it. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 16 is 4. We'll get 2 over 4, which is 1/2. Okay, let's try another one. Let's do 5 times the square root of 6 over square root of 4. Okay, so first let's do just like we did multiplying. Look at the outside and the inside separate. So we have 5 over 1. We're just going to leave that alone. And then we have square root of 6 over square root of 4. Okay, so square root of 6, and remember square root of 4 is just a 2. So we're going to end up with 5 times the square root of 6 over 2. Okay, let's try this one. We're going to do square root of 10 over 3 times the square root of 4. Alright, so let's look at square root of 10. That we can't do anything with. We can simplify it. But square root of 4 is 2. So we'll get 3 times 2. So this is going to equal square root of 10 over 6. Okay, so far we've done pretty good. We haven't had to do our rule where there's no radicals in the denominator. Well, let's try this one. Let's do 2 over 2 times the square root of 2. Okay, so first let's deal with the whole numbers. We have 2 over 2, which is just 1. So we can pretty much just cancel those. And we're left with a 1 up here and a square root of 2 down here. Alright, so that's great, except for we have this square, we have a radical in the denominator, and we have to rationalize it. So here's how we rationalize it. It's square root of 2. What we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the square root of 2 over square root of 2. That's going to get rid of that radical in the denominator, and we're not really changing the problem, because remember, if we do square root of 2 over square root of 2, that's just 1, and so we're really just multiplying by 1. And so we do 1 times square root of 2, which is square root of 2, and square root of 2 times square root of 2 is just 2. So we end up with that. And that's how you rationalize the denominator. Okay, let's try another one. We're going to do square root of 25 and we're going to divide that by square root of 15. Okay, so first let's see if we can simplify. Square root of 25, that's 5 times 5, so that's just 5. Square root of 15, are there any perfect squares in 15? No, there's not, so we have to leave it alone. So we end up with square root of 15. Okay, so now we have a radical in the denominator. We have to do the rationalizing. We have to do square root of 15 over square root of 15. And we end up with 5 times the square root of 15 over square root of 15 times square root of 15 is just 15, like that. And then we can simplify the outside. 5 over 15 is the same as 1/3. So we end up with square root of 15 over 3.